He walked through the front door whistling, the smell of another woman's luxury perfume still clinging to the collar of his bespoke suit. He was convinced he was untouchable, the king of his own castle. He looked his wife in the eye, flashed that winning, arrogant smile, and asked what was for dinner, completely unaware that the document sitting in the safe upstairs wasn't just a divorce petition. It was a detonation code for his entire existence. Adrian thought he was the smartest man in the room, but he was about to learn a brutal lesson. A patient woman is the most dangerous enemy you will ever make. This isn't just a story about an affair. This is the story of how one man lost his fortune, his reputation, and his freedom, all because he thought he could outsmart the woman who built him. If you looked at the Instagram feed of Sophie and Adrian Caldwell, you would see the definition of the American dream. They lived in a sprawling, glass-fronted property in the hills of Tiburon, overlooking the San Francisco Bay. Adrian was the CEO of Caldwell Dynamics, a boutique logistics firm that had recently secured a massive government contract. He was 42, handsome in that polished, gym-honed way, with a charisma that disarmed clients and competitors alike. Sophie was the quiet power. At 40, she was elegant, sharp, and usually found in the background of Adrian's loud victories. People often forgot that Caldwell Dynamics was built on the back-end code Sophie had written 15 years ago in their cramped apartment in Oakland. They forgot that the seed money came from Sophie's inheritance from her grandmother. To the world, Adrian was the genius and Sophie was the lucky wife. And the tragedy was, after years of hearing it, Adrian had started to believe it too. The shift was subtle at first. It started in late 2023. Adrian's business trips to Seattle and Austin became more frequent. His phone, once tossed carelessly on the kitchen island, was now glued to his hand, screen always facing down. He bought a new wardrobe, sharper cuts, younger brands. He started critiquing Sophie's appearance, making offhand comments about her staying home too much, even though she was managing the company's finances remotely. "You've let yourself go a bit, Soph," he said one evening, over a dinner she had spent 3 hours cooking. He poked at the roast chicken with disdain. "I need a partner who looks the part. We're moving in different circles now." Sophie didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just cut a piece of chicken, chewed it slowly and looked at him. "I'll keep that in mind, Adrian," she said. The arrogance of the man was blinding. He truly believed Sophie was a fixture in his life, like the expensive espresso machine or the heated floors, something that existed to serve him and would never malfunction. He didn't know that Sophie had an IQ of 145 and a tolerance for disrespect that had hit exactly 0% 3 months prior. It wasn't a text message that gave him away. It wasn't lipstick on a collar. It was the money. Sophie was the CFO in all but title. She managed the accounts. One Tuesday in November, she noticed a recurring withdrawal labeled consulting fees going to a shell company registered in Delaware. $5,000 a month, escalating to 10. Sophie didn't ask him about it. Instead, she did what she did best. She dug. She traced the LLC. It led to a mailbox service in Nevada, which forwarded to a residential address in downtown San Francisco, a luxury apartment complex. The tenant? A 24-year-old marketing coordinator named Brittany Wells. Brittany had been an intern at Caldwell Dynamics a year ago. Sophie remembered her, bright, bubbly, and overly eager to laugh at Adrian's jokes. Sophie sat in her home office, the glow of the monitor illuminating her pale face. She wasn't heartbroken. That was the strange part. She felt a cold, clinical clarity. The man she loved had died years ago. This stranger downstairs drinking scotch and watching Bloomberg was a parasite. She logged into the family cloud account. Adrian, in his infinite tech illiteracy, ironic for a tech CEO, had synced his new iPad to the main family account, but turned off the notifications, thinking that was enough to hide his tracks. He didn't realize that his Notes app was syncing in real time. There, In a folder locked with a 4-digit PIN, his birthday naturally, were drafts of love letters. Promises. She's boring, babe. She doesn't get me like you do. Just a few more months. I need to get the house refinanced so I can cash out. Then I'm filing. Sophie read that line again. Cash out. Then filing. He wasn't just cheating. He was planning to liquidate their assets, take the equity from the house, which was legally hers but put in both names for tax purposes, and leave her with nothing but the dust. Sophie closed the laptop. She walked downstairs. Adrian was on the patio, smoking a cigar. "Hey," he said, not looking back. "Pack a bag. I'm going to Cabo for a networking retreat this weekend. You should go visit your sister or something. I need the house empty when I get back. I'm hosting the board." "Sure, Adrian," Sophie said, her voice steady. "I'll make sure everything is exactly where it needs to be." She walked back upstairs, picked up her phone, and dialed a number. It wasn't a marriage counselor. It was a man named Elias Thorne, the most ruthless forensic accountant in the Bay Area. "Elias," she said, "it's Sophie. I'm ready to pull the trigger. But I don't just want half. I want to burn the kingdom down." The networking retreat in Cabo was, predictably, a romantic getaway with Brittany. Sophie knew this because she had accessed Adrian's Uber account and watched in real time as he took a ride from the airport to the Las Ventanas al Paraíso resort. While Adrian was sipping margaritas and making promises he couldn't keep to a girl half his age, Sophie was at work. She didn't pack a bag to go to her sister's. Instead, she invited Elias Thorne and a private investigator named Jack Miller to the house. "The prenup," Elias said, sitting at the mahogany dining table spreading out documents. "It's ironclad on the surface, Sophie. If you divorce him, he gets 50% of the company because he's listed as the primary founder on the incorporation papers from 2010. He swindled you back then, and he knows it." "I know," Sophie said, pouring them coffee. "But look at Article 14, Section B." Elias adjusted his glasses. He read the fine print. His eyebrows shot up. "The moral turpitude clause? Nobody enforces these anymore, Sophie. It's for public image." "It is when the company contracts with the Department of Defense," Sophie said, a small, dangerous smile playing on her lips. "Adrian just signed that government contract, remember? To maintain his security clearance and the contract, the CEO must not be involved in any gross misconduct involving financial misappropriation or reputational hazards that endanger the firm's standing." "Cheating isn't financial misappropriation," Jack the PI grunted. "No," Sophie slid a stack of bank statements across the table. "But using company funds to pay for your mistress's apartment is. Those consulting fees to Brittany, they came from the Caldwell Dynamics operational expense account. He's embezzling from his own company to fund his affair. That's fraud. That violates the DoD contract." Elias whistled low. "If this gets out, he loses the contract. The company's stock tanks." "Exactly," Sophie said. "I don't want the company as it is. I want to destroy his value, buy him out for pennies when he's desperate, and then rebuild it. But first, I need him to feel safe. I need him to think he's won." The weekend passed. Sophie moved nothing. She cleaned the house. She prepared a roast beef dinner, his favorite. She bought a bottle of his favorite vintage Cabernet. When Adrian came home Sunday night, he was sunburnt and smelling of coconut oil. He dragged his suitcase in, looking around suspiciously. "You're still here?" he asked, frowning. "I thought you were going to your sister's." "I decided to stay and make sure you came home to a good meal," Sophie said, wearing a silk dress he used to like. "How was the retreat?" Adrian relaxed. The arrogance settled back onto his shoulders like a comfortable coat. He saw the wine. He saw the submissive wife. She has no clue, he thought. God, she's pathetic. It was brutal, he lied smoothly, loosening his tie. Meetings non-stop. But I secured the second phase of funding. I'm carrying this family on my back, Soph. "I know you are," she said, handing him a glass of wine. "I'm so proud of you." He took a sip, smirking. "You know, I've been thinking. We should refinance the house this week. The market is hot. We pull out $2 million, put it into the company, and double it in 6 months. I need you to sign the papers on Tuesday." This was it. The cash out. He was going to drain the equity, hide the cash, and serve her papers on Friday. "Of course," Sophie said, her eyes wide and trusting. "Whatever you think is best, darling." He laughed. He actually laughed. He walked over and kissed her on the cheek, patronizingly. "That's a good girl. You just worry about the house. Leave the big numbers to me." He went upstairs to shower. Sophie stood in the kitchen, the smile vanishing from her face instantly. She pulled her phone from her pocket. She had recorded the entire conversation. She texted Elias. "He wants to sign on Tuesday. Have the papers ready for Wednesday morning, and tell the board of directors to clear their schedule." The next morning, Monday, Adrian went to work feeling invincible. He texted Brittany. She agreed to sign. "We'll be rich by Friday. Start looking for houses in Malibu." He walked into his office at Caldwell Dynamics, greeted his staff with a wave, and sat in his leather chair. He felt like a king, but at 10 a.m. his secretary, Mrs. Higgins, buzzed him. Her voice was shaking. "Mr. Caldwell, there are some people here to see you. I don't have appointments," Adrian snapped. It's the auditors, sir, and 2 officers from the Department of Defense." Adrian's blood ran cold. He stood up, straightening his jacket. "Send them in. It must be a routine check on the new contract." But when the door opened, it wasn't just the auditors. It was Sophie. She walked in wearing a sharp navy blazer, holding a thick binder. She wasn't the quiet housewife anymore. She looked like a CEO. "Sophie," Adrian stammered, "what are you doing here?" "I'm here to present evidence to the auditors regarding the unauthorized use of company funds," she said, her voice projecting clearly across the room. She didn't look at him. She looked at the DOD officers. "Gentlemen, if you'll turn to tab 3, you'll see the wire transfers from the operational account to a Miss Brittany Wells, categorized falsely as business consulting." "Sophie, stop!" Adrian lunged forward, his face turning purple. "What the hell are you doing? You're crazy." One of the officers stepped between them, hand on his holster. "Sit down, Mr. Caldwell. This is a mistake," Adrian screamed. "She's just a jealous wife. She's hysterical." Sophie turned to him then. The look in her eyes was terrifyingly calm. "I'm not jealous, Adrian, and I'm certainly not hysterical. I'm the majority shareholder as of this morning." "What?" Adrian froze. "Grandma's inheritance," she said softly. "The loan I gave the company to start. It had a convertibility clause. In the event of financial mismanagement by the CEO, the debt converts to equity. I triggered it an hour ago." Adrian's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "You're fired, Adrian," she said. But that was just the beginning. The real twist was yet to come, because Adrian, in his panic, was about to make a mistake that would turn a corporate dispute into a criminal investigation. Adrian sat in his Tesla in the parking lot of the company he had built, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. The security guard, a man named Frank, whom Adrian had never bothered to learn the last name of in 10 years, had just escorted him out of the building like a common thief. Fired. The word tasted like ash. Majority shareholder. He pounded the steering wheel, letting out a guttural scream that no one could hear through the soundproof glass. Sophie had played him. The mouse had caught the cat. But as the adrenaline began to spike, Adrian's arrogance, bruised but not broken, surged back. "She thinks she's won," he muttered, fumbling for his phone. "She doesn't know about the Cayman accounts. She doesn't know about the server backup. This was the mistake that would seal his fate." In his panic, Adrian didn't call a lawyer first. He called Brittany. "Babe," he said, his voice high and fast when she picked up. "Listen, something happened at work. Crazy misunderstanding with the auditors. Sophie is trying a hostile takeover. I need to lay low for a few days. I'm coming over." There was a pause on the line. Then Brittany's voice, cool and detached. "You can't come here, Adrian." "What? Why? I pay the rent on that place." "Actually," Brittany said, "the landlord called me an hour ago. Apparently the check for this month bounced. The corporate card was declined. And Adrian, I saw the news." "What news?" "TMZ. Someone leaked the video of you getting escorted out by the feds. It's trending. Tech CEO investigated for defense contract fraud. My friends are texting me. I can't be seen with you right now. It's bad for my brand." "Your brand?" Adrian screamed. "I bought you that brand. I bought your followers." Click. She hung up. Adrian stared at the phone. He was alone. But panic breeds stupidity. He remembered the laptop he kept in the trunk, a backup machine he used for travel. He needed to access the company servers remotely. He had to delete the email chains regarding the consulting fees and, more importantly, the emails with Gordon Banks, the lobbyist he had bribed to secure the DoD contract. If Sophie saw those, he wasn't just losing money. He was going to prison. He drove to a Starbucks 3 towns over, wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap. He connected to the public Wi-Fi, another fatal error in operational security, and logged into the Caldwell Dynamics admin portal using a backdoor password he was sure Sophie didn't know. King Adrian 82. He got in. He saw the files. Project Omega. Finances. He highlighted the entire folder. He hovered over the permanent delete button. His heart was hammering against his ribs. Delete it, and there's no proof, he thought. It's just her word against mine. He clicked. Are you sure? Yes. The progress bar spun. Deleting 10%, 50%, 100%. Files deleted. Adrian let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. He slumped back in the wooden chair. He had done it. He had scrubbed the evidence. Now, he just had to fight Sophie in divorce court for half the assets. He could survive that. He ordered a black coffee, feeling the swagger return. He opened his banking app to check his personal savings, planning to transfer the $400,000 sitting there to a crypto wallet before Sophie could freeze it. Access denied. Account frozen by court order. Case hash 24 civ 0092. What? He tapped the screen furiously. No. His phone rang. It was a number he didn't recognize. This is Adrian Caldwell, he barked. Mr. Caldwell, a deep, gravelly voice answered. This is Special Agent Miller with the FBI Cyber Crimes Division. We strongly suggest you remain at your current location at the Starbucks on 4th and Main. We have units 2 minutes out. Adrian froze. How? How do you know where I am? Mr. Caldwell. The agent's voice was almost bored. When you logged into your company server to delete subpoenaed evidence, you triggered a tripwire your wife's forensic team installed this morning. And since you deleted files relevant to a federal investigation involving a DoD contract, you just committed felony obstruction of justice and destruction of evidence. You didn't delete the files, Adrian. You just sent a notification to us that you tried. Adrian dropped the phone. It cracked on the tile floor. He looked out the window. 2 black SUVs were pulling into the parking lot. He didn't run. He couldn't. He just sat there, watching his reflection in the window, realizing that Sophie hadn't just checkmated him. She had handed him the rope and watched him tie the noose himself. 3 months later. Adrian was out on bail, but he looked like a shadow of his former self. The tailored suits were gone, replaced by an off-the-rack jacket that hung loosely on his frame. His assets were frozen, his passport surrendered, and he was living in a motel on the outskirts of San Jose because Sophie had obtained a restraining order, barring him from the Tiburon estate. But today was the day he thought he would win. Today was the divorce hearing regarding the division of marital assets. Despite the criminal charges looming over him, California was a no-fault state and a community property state. Adrian's new lawyer, a strip mall shark named Richard Sterling, he couldn't afford the big firms anymore, had assured him of one thing: Sophie couldn't touch the Bitcoin. Years ago, Adrian had bought 500 Bitcoin when they were cheap. He had stored the cold storage wallet, a USB drive, in a safety deposit box under a fake name, Thomas Anderson. It was worth millions now. It was his escape fund. He planned to declare bankruptcy, let Sophie take the house and the ruined company, and then disappear to a non-extradition country with his crypto fortune once the heat died down. The courtroom was sterile and cold. Sophie sat on the other side, flanked by Elias Thorne and a high-powered divorce attorney named Catherine Stone. Sophie looked radiant. She wore white, a psychological power move suggesting innocence and purity. Judge Harrison adjusted his glasses and looked at the two parties. "We are here to finalize the financial separation of assets. Mr. Sterling, you are claiming that Mr. Caldwell is destitute." "That is correct, Your Honor," Sterling said, standing up and smoothing his cheap tie. "My client has been stripped of his employment. His bank accounts have been drained by legal fees. He has no liquid assets. We are asking for spousal support from Mrs. Caldwell, given that she is now the sole owner of the profitable entity Caldwell Dynamics." A murmur went through the courtroom. The audacity. He cheated, stole, and was now asking for alimony. Sophie didn't flinch. She simply wrote something on a notepad and slid it to her lawyer, Catherine. Catherine Stone stood up. "Your Honor, we find the request for spousal support interesting, considering Mr. Caldwell is currently sitting on approximately $32 million in undisclosed assets." Adrian's head snapped up. Sterling looked confused. "Objection! Pure speculation." "Is it?" Catherine smiled. She picked up a remote and pointed it at the screen mounted on the wall. "Exhibit C, Your Honor." The screen flickered to life. It showed a video. It was grainy, black and white footage. It showed the interior of a bank vault. The timestamp was from 3 years ago. In the video, Adrian walked in, looked over his shoulder, and opened a safety deposit box. He placed a small silver USB drive inside. "So?" Adrian shouted, forgetting courtroom protocol. "That's just a USB drive. It could be family photos." "We thought so too," Catherine said smoothly, "until we analyzed the metadata of your Notes app, which Mrs. Caldwell had access to. You had a note titled Grocery List. It contained a string of 12 random words: lantern, velvet, orbit, crash." Adrian's face went grey. It was his seed phrase, the recovery password for his Bitcoin wallet. Catherine continued, "We didn't need the USB drive, Adrian. We had the keys, and acting as the court-appointed conservator of the marital estate during the freezing order, Mrs. Caldwell accessed the blockchain ledger." Another slide appeared. It showed a transaction history. Outgoing, 500 BTC. Destination, the United States Department of Justice Asset Forfeiture Holding Account. "What?" Adrian wheezed. "Mrs. Caldwell surrendered the undisclosed assets to the authorities yesterday," Catherine said, her voice ringing with finality. "Since you failed to disclose them in your financial affidavit, you committed perjury. Furthermore, since these assets were purchased with funds siphoned from the company accounts back in 2018, which our forensic accountant Mr. Thorne discovered, they are considered proceeds of crime." "Sophie didn't keep the money, Adrian. She gave it to the government to reduce the company's liability for your fraud." The courtroom was silent. Sophie turned to look at Adrian. Her expression wasn't angry. It was one of pity. "You have nothing, Adrian," she said, loud enough for him to hear. "I surrendered the crypto to save the company's employees. I saved the pensions of the people you tried to rob. You wanted to leave with everything. You leave with nothing." Judge Harrison banged his gavel, his face stern. "Mr. Caldwell, in light of this revelation of perjury and hiding assets, I am dismissing your claim for spousal support with prejudice. I am awarding 100% of the remaining marital assets, including the Tiburon residence and all vehicles, to Mrs. Caldwell. Furthermore, I am forwarding the transcript of this hearing to the district attorney's office to add perjury charges to your docket." Adrian slumped in his chair. He felt like he couldn't breathe. The Bitcoin was his lifeboat, his retirement, his freedom, gone. But the universe wasn't done with him yet. As the bailiff moved to escort Adrian out, since his bail conditions were now being reviewed, the back doors of the courtroom burst open. A woman walked in. It wasn't Brittany. It was a woman in her late 50s, wearing a cheap coat and looking terrified. "I need to speak," she cried out. "I need to speak to the judge." Adrian looked back. He didn't recognize her, but Sophie did. Sophie stood up, her face losing its color for the first time. "Mrs. Gable?" Sophie whispered. It was the wife of Caldwell Dynamics' former CFO, a man named Tom Gable, who had committed suicide 4 years ago. Everyone thought it was due to depression. "He didn't kill himself," the woman screamed, pointing a shaking finger at Adrian. "My husband didn't kill himself. Adrian made him take the fall for the first audit. He blackmailed him." The courtroom erupted into chaos. Adrian's eyes widened in genuine horror. This was the one skeleton he thought was buried so deep it would never see the light. The fraud was one thing, the embezzlement was another. But this was something much darker. Sophie looked at Adrian, and for the first time, she didn't see a cheater or a thief. She saw a monster. And she realized that destroying his finances wasn't enough. She had to make sure he never saw the light of day again. The courtroom had cleared, but the echo of Martha Gable's accusation hung in the air like toxic smoke. Adrian had been remanded into custody, his bail revoked due to the flight risk proven by the hidden Bitcoin. But Sophie didn't go home to celebrate. She took Martha Gable to a quiet diner 3 blocks from the courthouse. Martha's hands shook as she held a cup of lukewarm tea. "Tom didn't just have depression, Sophie," Martha said, her voice barely a whisper. "He was scared. For the last 6 months of his life, he was terrified of Adrian." Sophie leaned in. "You said blackmail. What did Adrian have on him?" "Not on him," Martha wept. "On our son, Leo." Martha explained the nightmare. 4 years ago, their son, Leo, then 19, had gotten mixed up with a bad crowd. He was driving a car when his friend, who was dealing, tossed a backpack of narcotics into the back seat during a traffic stop. Leo was looking at 10 years in prison. "Adrian found out before we did," Martha said. "He knew the district attorney. He told Tom he could make the charges disappear, pull strings, get the evidence lost. But in exchange, Tom had to sign off on the cooked books for the 2019 fiscal year. He had to falsify the inventory reports to pump the stock price before Adrian's first big sell-off." Sophie felt sick. So Tom did it to save Leo? Yes. But then, Adrian didn't stop. He kept demanding more. He told Tom that if he ever tried to leave, he would not only revive the charges against Leo, but frame Tom for the embezzlement Adrian was committing. Tom was trapped. He told me the night before he died. Martha choked back a sob. He said, "The only way to protect you and Leo is if I'm not here to testify." Sophie reached across the table and held Martha's hand. "Do you have proof, Martha? We believe you, but the law needs proof." Martha reached into a frayed purse and pulled out a small, rusty key. Tom had a storage unit in Oakland. He paid cash. I didn't know about it until I found the receipt in his old winter coat last week. I went there. It was empty, except for a box. She slid a digital voice recorder across the table. It was an old model, scratched and worn. "I haven't listened to all of it," Martha whispered. I couldn't bear to hear his voice. "But the first file, it's a meeting." Sophie put on her headphones. She pressed play. First, static, then the sound of a door closing, then Adrian's voice, clear, arrogant, and unmistakably cruel. "Don't give me moral lectures, Tom. You're the CFO. Your job is to make the numbers match my reality. If you don't sign these audits, I make a phone call, and little Leo doesn't just go to jail, He goes to general population in San Quentin. Do you know what happens to a kid like Leo in there? Do you want that on your conscience?" Then Tom's voice, breaking. "Please, Adrian, I can't do this anymore. It's fraud. It's business, Tom. Now sign the paper, or say goodbye to your son." Sophie took the headphones off. Her hands were trembling, not with fear, but with a cold, volcanic rage. This wasn't just white-collar crime. This was psychological torture that led to a man's death. Adrian was a predator. "Elias," Sophie said into her phone a moment later, ignoring the time, "wake up the PI and call the district attorney directly. Tell him we have evidence of extortion and manslaughter." While Sophie was building the coffin, Adrian was experiencing the reality of it. County jail was a far cry from the master suite in Tiburon. He had been stripped of his suit, his watch, and his dignity. He sat in a holding cell wearing an orange jumpsuit that smelled of bleach and sweat. He was pacing, muttering to himself, "I can fix this. I just need a new lawyer. Sterling is an idiot. I need a fixer." He used his one phone call not to call his mother or a friend, but to call Brittany. Again, he was deluded enough to think she was his soulmate, his partner in crime. "The number you have dialed has been disconnected," the automated voice said. He slammed the receiver against the wall. She ran, he thought. Coward. But he was wrong. Brittany hadn't run. At that exact moment, Brittany Wells was sitting in an interrogation room at the FBI field office. She wasn't wearing designer clothes anymore. She was wearing sweatpants, no makeup, and looked about 12 years old. "I didn't know," she wailed to Agent Miller. "I thought he was just rich. I didn't know he was stealing from the government. I didn't know about the dead CFO." "Miss Wells," Agent Miller said, leaning back in his chair, "you accepted $150,000 in consulting fees for work you never did. That makes you an accessory to wire fraud and money laundering. You're looking at 5 to 7 years. Brittany hyperventilated. "I can't go to jail. I'm an influencer." "Then help us," Miller said calmly. "We know Adrian had a second set of books, a physical ledger. He mentioned it in his emails, but we can't find it on the servers. Where is it?" Brittany wiped her nose. She hesitated. She knew loyalty to Adrian meant prison. Betrayal meant freedom. It was the easiest choice of her life. He has a safe," she stammered. "Not at the house, at his mother's nursing home, in her room. He said nobody would ever look for evidence in a dementia ward." Agent Miller smiled. "Thank you, Miss Wells." The raid on the Sunnyvale Meadows nursing home was discreet, but effective. In the closet of Mrs. Caldwell Sr., a woman who no longer recognized her own son, agents found a fireproof safe bolted to the floor behind a stack of adult diapers. Inside was the Holy Grail, the Black Ledger. It contained everything. The bribes to the lobbyist Gordon Banks, the falsified inventory reports, the extortion scheme against Tom Gable, and, most damning of all, a handwritten list of loose ends with names crossed out. Tom Gable's name was crossed out. The trial of the people versus. Adrian Caldwell became the media circus of the year. It wasn't just a financial scandal anymore. It was a true crime saga. Adrian sat at the defense table looking gaunt. His high-priced legal team had abandoned him when the money ran out. He was represented by a public defender, a tired man named Mr. Gonzalez, who had advised Adrian to plead guilty 3 times already. "I'm not pleading," Adrian hissed at him. "They don't have enough. It's all circumstantial." But then the prosecution called their star witness. "The people call Brittany Wells to the stand." Adrian froze. He turned around. Brittany walked in. She looked modest, demure, wearing a cardigan and glasses. She didn't look at him. "She's going to lie for me," Adrian whispered to Gonzalez. "She loves me." Gonzalez just sighed and started packing his briefcase. Brittany took the oath. "Miss Wells," the prosecutor asked, "what was your relationship with the defendant?" "I was his mistress," she said clearly, "and his accomplice." The jury gasped. "Did Mr. Caldwell ever discuss his business dealings with you?" "Yes," Brittany said. "He loved to brag. He told me that he was untouchable. He told me that his wife, Sophie, was a useful idiot who kept the lights on while he skimmed the cream." Sophie, sitting in the front row, remained stone-faced. "Did he ever mention Tom Gable?" "Yes," Brittany said. She finally looked at Adrian. Her eyes were cold. "One night he was drunk. He was laughing about how easy it is to control people. He said, 'Tom Gable didn't have the stomach for the big leagues. I had to push him off the ledge so I could fly.' He laughed about it. He said he owned Tom's soul." "Liar!" Adrian screamed, jumping to his feet. "You ungrateful little brat! I made you!" "Order!" The judge banged the gavel. "Restrain the defendant!" Two bailiffs forced Adrian back into his chair. He was panting, wild-eyed. He looked at the jury. They weren't looking at him with doubt. They were looking at him with revulsion. He looked at Brittany. She was checking her fingernails, bored. And then he looked at Sophie. Sophie was the only one looking him directly in the eye. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't crying. She gave him a small, almost imperceptible nod. It was a nod of closure. Checkmate. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Verdict, count 1. 5, wire fraud. Guilty. Count 6, embezzlement. Guilty. Count 7, extortion. Guilty. Count 8, money laundering. Guilty. Because of the loose ends list and the testimony regarding Tom Gable, the district attorney had added a charge of involuntary manslaughter via coercion. Verdict, guilty. The sentencing hearing was set for 2 weeks later. Adrian stood before the judge. He had prepared a speech about how he was a job creator, a pillar of the community, a man under stress. The judge didn't let him read it. "Mr. Caldwell," Judge Harrison said, peering over his spectacles, "you are the worst kind of criminal. You didn't steal to feed your family. You stole because you have a hole in your soul that no amount of money can fill. You destroyed a marriage, you corrupted a young woman, you defrauded the United States government, and you drove a good man to his death. I sentence you to 25 years in federal prison, without the possibility of parole for the first 20. As the gavel came down, the sound echoed like a gunshot. Adrian was handcuffed. As they led him away, he turned one last time to look for Sophie. He wanted to beg. He wanted to scream. But Sophie was already walking out the door. She walked out of the courthouse and into the bright California sun. Elias Thorne was waiting for her. "It's done," Elias said. "Not quite," Sophie said, putting on her sunglasses. "We still have a company to save." She didn't go home to cry. She went straight to the offices of Caldwell Dynamics. The employees were terrified. They thought the company was dead. They thought they were all out of a job. Sophie walked onto the main floor. She stood on a desk. "Listen to me," she shouted. The room went silent. "Adrian Caldwell is gone. He is never coming back. But we are still here. The code is still good. The logistics are still sound. I built the back end of this company 15 years ago, and I am going to rebuild the reputation starting today. No layoffs, no secrets. We are going to work hard, and we are going to pay back every cent he stole. Who is with me?" There was a silence. Then a slow clap started. It was Mrs. Higgins, Adrian's old secretary. Then the engineers joined in. Then the sales team. Soon the whole office was cheering. Sophie smiled, a real smile. She wasn't Adrian's wife anymore. She was the CEO. But the story wasn't quite over. There was one final twist waiting for Adrian in prison, a twist that would ensure he suffered just as much as he had made others suffer. 6 months had bled away since the gavel fell, turning Adrian Caldwell's life into a monochromatic nightmare. Federal Correctional Institution, Lompoc, was technically a low-security facility. The press liked to call it Club Fed, painting a picture of tennis courts and easy living. But for a man like Adrian, who had spent the last decade flying private and sleeping on Egyptian cotton, it was a slow, grinding suffocation. There were no heated floors here. There were no executive assistants to berate when the coffee wasn't exactly 185 degrees. There was only the relentless, soul-crushing routine of the 6 a.m. buzzer, the metallic taste of the water, and the permeating smell of industrial disinfectant that clung to his skin no matter how hard he scrubbed. Adrian had lost 25 pounds. His hair, once a lush, professionally dyed chestnut that commanded boardrooms, was now thinning rapidly, a patch of stark, defeating white roots reclaiming his scalp. His days were no longer spent moving millions of dollars in logistics contracts. Instead, he worked the laundry detail. For 12 cents an hour, the former CEO folded the rough, stained sheets of convicted racketeers and drug traffickers. Yet, even in the midst of this humiliation, Adrian clung to a desperate, delusional shred of his former self. He refused to socialize with the common criminals in his block. He spent his recreation hours in the law library, hunched over battered legal textbooks, scribbling furious, illegible notes. He was convinced there was a loophole, a technicality, a mistake in the filing procedure. He wrote letters to Sophie, dozens of them. They oscillated wildly between tearful apologies and vitriolic demands, commanding her to liquidate assets he no longer owned to fund a new defense team. They all went unanswered. The silence from the outside world was louder than the prison riots, until a rainy Tuesday in November, when the grey routine was finally broken. "Caldwell," the guard grunted, banging a baton against the cell bars. "Movement! You've got a visitor." Adrian's heart hammered against his ribs. He sat up on his bunk, his pulse racing. She cracked, he thought, a surge of adrenaline washing away the lethargy. She finally cracked. The company is tanking without me. She realizes she can't steer the ship. She's here to beg for the master codes, or maybe she's realized that 25 years is too harsh. He smoothed his orange jumpsuit with trembling hands, splashed cold water on his face, and tried to muster the ghost of his old swagger. He practiced his expression in the scratched metal mirror, stern, disappointed, but willing to be merciful if the price was right. He walked into the visitation room, chin held high, ignoring the shackles that clinked softly around his ankles. Sophie was sitting on the other side of the thick, scratched plexiglass. The sight of her hit him like a physical blow. He expected to see a woman in mourning, a woman stressed and fraying at the edges. Instead, he saw a monolith of success. Sophie was wearing a cream-colored, tailored suit that Adrian recognized as a custom Italian design, something that cost more than the car he used to drive. Her hair was different. The sensible long style she wore for him was gone, replaced by a sharp, chic bob that framed her face like a helmet of gold. She didn't look tired. She looked radiant. She looked like she had just inhaled the fresh air that Adrian was starving for. Adrian sat down, the metal chair screeching against the floor. He picked up the black phone receiver, a smirk twitching at the corner of his mouth as he fell back into his old, patronizing rhythm. "I knew you'd come," he said, his voice raspy from disuse. "Let me guess, Q3 earnings are a disaster? The board is eating you alive? I can help you, Soph, I really can. But we need to talk about a quid pro quo. I need a new lawyer, and I need you to advocate for a reduced sentence appeal based on hardship." Sophie looked at him, her expression completely unreadable. It wasn't anger. It wasn't love. It was the clinical detachment of a scientist observing a specimen in a jar. She picked up her receiver gracefully. "Hello, Adrian," she said. Her voice was crisp, clear, and utterly devoid of the warmth he remembered. "Cut the pleasantries," Adrian snapped, his patience fraying instantly. "How bad are the losses? Did the stock drop 20%? 30? You don't have the connections, Sophie. You don't know how to play the game." "Actually," Sophie said, interrupting him with a calm that was more terrifying than a scream, "we just posted our highest quarterly profit in the company's 14-year history. The stock is up 42% since the trial ended." Adrian blinked, his brain refusing to process the data. That's impossible. You're lying. You're trying to hurt me." "I stopped playing your game a long time ago, Adrian. I started playing mine." She reached into a Hermes bag and pulled out a folded document. She pressed it flat against the glass so he could read it. It was a press release, dated 2 weeks prior. Headline: Caldwell Dynamics officially rebrands as Gable and Cabal Logistics. Adrian's eyes nearly bulged out of his head. He clawed at the glass instinctively. You changed the name? You took my name off the building?" "I erased the name," Sophie corrected him coldly. "The name Caldwell is poison now. It's synonymous with fraud, embezzlement, and coerced suicide. I couldn't have that on the letterhead. So I renamed the company in honor of the man you destroyed, Tom Gable." Adrian gasped, feeling the air leave his lungs. "And there's more," Sophie continued, twisting the knife. "Guess who the new director of charitable operations is? Martha Gable, and the new head of IT security? The young man who built our new firewall?" "No," Adrian whispered, "not him." "Leo Gable," Sophie confirmed. "The junkie you tried to frame. It turns out, when he's not being blackmailed by a sociopath, he's a brilliant coder. He's doing a wonderful job finding all the back doors you left in the system and sealing them shut. The Gable family runs the company now, Adrian. I just signed the checks." Adrian felt bile rise in his throat. His legacy wasn't just ruined. It had been given to his enemies. "You can't do that. That's my company. I built it from nothing." "You built a house of cards," Sophie said, leaning in closer. "I built the foundation, and now I own the building." She pulled the paper back and folded it neatly. "But that's not why I came here today, Adrian. I didn't come to gloat about the stock price. I came to tell you the truth. Because I know you. I know you're sitting in that cell, telling yourself that this was all just bad luck. You think Brittany made a mistake. You think the FBI got a lucky tip. You think you're a victim of circumstance." "Brittany was a rat," Adrian spat, his eyes wild. "She turned on me to save her own skin." "No," Sophie said softly. The room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "I was the rat." Adrian went still. The background noise of the prison, the shouting guards, the buzzing doors, faded into a ringing silence. "What? Do you remember the day you bought your new iPhone 15? It was about 6 months before you even met Brittany." Adrian frowned, confused by the pivot. "Yeah, I remember, so?" "You couldn't get the data transfer to work. You were frustrated. You threw the box on the counter and asked me to fix it. You asked me to set up the cloud sync." Sophie's eyes locked onto his. "I did set it up, Adrian, but I didn't just sync it to the family iPad. I synced it to a private, encrypted server I rented." Adrian felt the blood drain from his face, leaving him dizzy. "I saw everything," Sophie whispered, her voice carrying the weight of a final judgment. "I saw the very first text you sent her. I saw you looking at real estate listings for her apartment. I saw the drafts of the emails to the lobbyist. I watched you type them in real time. You knew?" Adrian's voice was a broken wheeze. "You knew for a whole year. Why didn't you stop me? Why didn't you scream? Why didn't you divorce me then?" "Because if I divorced you then, you would have gotten half," Sophie said simply, as if explaining a basic math problem. "We live in a community property state. If I left you for cheating, you would have walked away with 50% of my grandmother's money and half the company. I couldn't let that happen." She paused, letting the realization sink in. "I needed you to cross the line from immoral to illegal. I needed you to commit a felony that would trigger the moral turpitude clause in the corporate charter, allowing me to strip your equity. I needed you to sign that Department of Defense contract so that your fraud would become a federal crime. And I needed you to try to hide the assets in Bitcoin so the judge would grant me 100% of the marital estate." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. It was a terrifying, triumphant expression. "I didn't just catch you, Adrian. I let you hang yourself. Every step you took, The affair, the bribes, the networking trip to Cabo. I let it happen. I waited. I watched. And when you were standing on the very edge of the cliff, convinced you were a god who could fly, I just gave you a little push. Adrian dropped the phone. It swung on its metal cord, hitting the wall with a dull thud. He stared at her through the glass, his mouth open, his mind shattering. He realized then that he had never been the genius. He had never been the shark. He was just the bait. Sophie stood up. She smoothed her jacket, checking her watch. She didn't pick up the phone again. She simply placed her hand on the glass for a brief second, a gesture of finality, like closing a casket, and then turned her back on him. "Sophie!" Adrian screamed, the sound muffled by the thick glass. He slammed his fists against the barrier. "Sophie, come back! You can't leave me here. You knew! You planned it! Sophie!" The guards moved in instantly. They grabbed him by the arms, dragging him back as he kicked and screamed, a broken man in an orange jumpsuit, realizing too late that the quiet woman he had underestimated was the architect of his entire reality. Outside, the rain had stopped. The clouds were breaking apart, revealing a piercing blue sky. Sophie walked to her waiting car, her heels clicking rhythmically on the pavement. A young man was waiting in the driver's seat. It was Leo Gable, looking sharp in a button-down shirt, the shadows of his past erased by the purpose of his present. "Everything okay, Mrs. Caldwell?" Leo asked, starting the engine. "Please, Leo," she said, buckling her seatbelt and looking at the horizon where the sun was just beginning to blind them. "Call me Sophie. And yes, everything is finally perfect." She pulled out her phone and opened her contact list. She scrolled to the name Adrian. She hovered her thumb over the screen. Delete contact. Confirm. She tossed the phone into her purse and looked out the window as the prison faded into the rear-view mirror. "Let's go to work." And that is the brutal, satisfying end of Adrian Caldwell. He thought he was the king of the world, playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers. But he forgot the most important rule of the game. You never underestimate the person who knows your every move. Adrian's arrogance was his blindfold. And by the time he took it off, he had already lost his freedom, his fortune, and his legacy. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one holding all the aces. Sophie didn't just get revenge. She got absolute justice. She played the long game, protected her future, and honored the victims of Adrian's greed in the most poetic way possible. Now I have to ask you, what do you think about Sophie's method? Was waiting a year to ensure he got a life sentence a stroke of genius, or was it too cold-blooded? Did Adrian deserve 25 years, or was the trap too cruel? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one, and I'd love to debate this with you. If you enjoyed this story of high-stakes betrayal, karma, and the ultimate clapback, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Until next time, stay sharp and watch your back.